All right, looks like we're live. Appreciate those that are on with us this evening. Having some issues with our Zoom and hope that you can be patient with us. Looks like that there have been some updates on Zoom and not able to get some people in who are trying to get into the live feed on our the Zoom panel. So we'll do our best to get that fixed and get those squared away. Appreciate everybody being on with us, and I hope that you've had a good day, good evening, and we'll just continue to work together. Hopefully, we'll get this issue fixed really quickly. We'll go ahead and get started this evening. Again, appreciate everybody who's responded and who's interested in our studies. We'll go ahead and go through and hope that if you have any comments or questions, you could put those in the comments section there in the Facebook page. Of course, we're going to look at our four essentials that we have for our fellowship and for our group as we study together is, first of all, ask. Always ask questions. Secondly, listen. Be open to hear from various perspectives. Thirdly, look. Expect to see lots of different answers from lots of different places. And then, of course, fourthly and lastly, don't settle. Don't settle for something that doesn't make sense. And then as we get into our study this evening, I want you to know that it's okay to get something wrong. It's all right. Just because that you try to get everything just right, sometimes that slows things down. Sometimes working toward perfection can hold up progress. So lots of times we focus in on getting something so right that you forget that you have to go ahead and move on. But it's okay to get something wrong. Mistakes will be made. We want to learn from the experience. And again, you want to keep moving on. You don't want to let that just hold you back and keep you from moving forward. So how do we move forward? That's what we're going to look at this evening in our study. We'll be looking how we move forward. We find in the Gospel of Mark in chapter 8, verse 34, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. Well, what exactly does that mean? We hear this all the time. Of course, we look in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 18, verse 3. We see that according to the Gospel, Jesus is saying, truly, I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, lots of people think the kingdom of heaven is just talking about leaving this world, dying, going back into the grave, and somewhere in the afterlife, you wind up living in a mansion in the sky. This isn't what Jesus is talking about in Matthew 18:3, and we're going to look at that for just a short time this evening. We're going to do just a short reflection on Matthew 18:3. What does Jesus mean when he's talking about becoming like children? Now, we were taught growing up, like lots of people, that you just have to go back to some childlike state of innocence, that somehow that is how you make it to heaven. You get to be with God sometime in the afterlife. Well, let's actually look at what Matthew 18:3 says and what it means. So in Matthew 18:3, Jesus says again, verily I say unto you, except you be converted and become as little children, you shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. At first glance, this verse appears to be a simple directive on humility and innocence. However, a closer examination reveals a profound insight into the posture of learning that Jesus calls us to adopt. It's a disposition that embraces curiosity, humility, and the willingness to be shaped. Through the lens of lifelong learning, this verse becomes an invitation to see ourselves as children, open, inquisitive, and eager to understand the world around us as we journey through life and faith. So, what does it mean to have a childlike heart? It means that we're open to learn. We have an openness to learning. To become as little children implies an approach to life that embraces openness and curiosity. Children are naturally inquisitive, and their openness to learning allows them to absorb knowledge rapidly. By invoking the imagery of childhood, Jesus calls his followers to cultivate a heart that is open to new perspectives and willing to ask questions, even when they may not yet really understand fully. This is the foundational mindset of a lifelong learner. Such a learner remains curious about the world, ready to see beyond their existing knowledge and embrace new ideas or new revelations. The person who learns with a childlike heart is continually growing and discovering in both faith and knowledge. Jesus' teaching challenges adults to resist the common tendency toward rigidity and complacency. We see this all too often in lots of settings, is that people are very rigid about what they believe. They're very have a very narrow scope of what's allowed to be said or questioned, and it leads to complacency. Every denomination of every type of church really likes one aspect of their faith or one aspect of the scripture or one aspect of the Bible. They focus on that, they emphasize it, and that becomes their identity. And that's really not beneficial to anybody. To just get locked into one area and that's all you ever talk about. And this happens way too often. These are developments that take place where you have uh, discussions that only take place just like in our world today, just in the echo chamber where you're only hearing yourself and you're not willing to listen to anything else. But getting back to this, we see that with age, many of us develop fixed ways of thinking, which can hinder growth. In essence, Jesus urges us to unlearn what binds us to old patterns so that we might embrace new insights with the enthusiasm and trust of a child. Lifelong learning requires us to adopt a stance of humility, one that acknowledges our limitations and the vastness of what we have yet to understand. This is the problem when you get those who feel like, well, I'm done. I've learned all I want to learn. I've asked all the questions. I'm as far as I want to go. And that just causes things to be stagnant. This is why Jesus uses uh, the whole notion of a child is that when you're an adult, you get to a point where you're fixed. And he's saying you must be pliable. You've got to be one that's excited about learning new things again. And that's what it means to be childlike. And of course, he talks about humility. It's what humility involves is recognizing the limits of our understanding. Not one of us, not one group of us, not one denomination or faith or religion holds all the truth that is seen in reality. Children possess a natural humility because they are aware of their dependence on others. In the same way, Jesus calls his followers to recognize their dependence on God and others as an essential part of spiritual growth. This verse in Matthew can be seen as a reminder that learning is not a solo journey. It requires community, it requires guidance, and a willingness to admit when we need help. I've known way too many who think that all they need is God and the Bible, and they've got all these things figured out and they don't need to hear from anybody else. How dare you question them? That sort of attitude, and those attitudes lead nowhere. Those attitudes just lead toward a person being puffed up and being drunk on their own understanding of things without ever testing it. This is the problem when churches also cut themselves off from the history. When you cut yourself off and you don't understand what's happened in the past, you're just going back through and just renegotiating the same mistakes without understanding a lot of this conversation has probably already happened, and you're cutting yourself off from the larger conversation that's going on, that's been going on for thousands of years. And you have no connection to it because you don't want to know that. And so, those of us that are constantly wanting to learn and grow are oftentimes accused of being arrogant because we refuse to just be complacent. But in actuality, it's turned on its head here because uh, it's the height of arrogance to think you can just figure things out on your own with God and the Bible. And that's just way too many people I know are like that. When humility is the fact of recognizing that I can't possibly know everything. I have to have others around me that can help me to not only question things, but to learn how to apply the things that I believe to be correct. Because you can begin to apply these things and realize that, oh, okay, this isn't going to work like I thought it was. But humility is recognizing the limits of our understanding. So to cultivate lifelong learning, we must embody this childlike humility, acknowledging that there's always more to learn and that others may offer perspectives that illuminate our path. This kind of humility dismantles pride, which so often impedes our ability to grow. In our relationship with God, humility helps us remain teachable, open to the wisdom of Scripture, open to the counsel of others, and to, of course, to the guidance of the Holy Spirit. But some people just want them and the Holy Spirit, and that's it, and they've got it all figured out, and you can't tell them anything. But all this leads toward the transformation of the heart and the mind. When Jesus says, except you be converted, this implies a transformation not only of the heart, but also of the mind. Becoming as little children necessitates an intentional change, a conscious decision to leave behind attitudes that prevent growth and adopt a mindset of continual learning. This transformation challenges us to reassess our assumptions, biases, and fixed beliefs, recognizing that true understanding requires us to view the world with fresh eyes. That's why I enjoy being around people that are older than me, that are in my same age group, and that are much younger. I learned this even in the workplace. I enjoy being around younger people who have a different way of looking at things. And this doesn't mean we all have to agree on it. This is the problem with so many, is that they can't be around people that just can't see things the way they do, or they can't be around people outside of their age group. Just like you'll have some complain about older people, like, oh, they're just these old fogies that don't understand anything, when they should be respected for at least the fact that they've had these experiences in their life. And I've known some older people, they're always making fun of the next generation to come along as if they're so lazy and ignorant that they'll never be able to do anything in the world, or that they're snowflakes and they've grew up in this world with such ease. But I've mentioned this over and over again before on the podcast and a teaching, is that this has always been the mindset. I've looked at clay tablets that are thousands of years old, and I've seen some where Egyptians were complaining about younger people and how younger people were just lazy and ungrateful and had it easy. And I'm thinking, how could they have had it easy, thousands of years ago? But this is something that's as old as time. It's as old as man. But Jesus is teaching us that, in order for us to grow and be transformed, we have to be willing to listen to others and to learn from them, but to also contribute what we understand as well. So we all work together. Of course, lifelong learning, lifelong learners embody this transformational attitude. Rather than seeing themselves as repositories of knowledge, they embrace the journey of exploration and discovery, knowing that each step forward is an invitation to deepen understanding. This approach extends to both faith and practical life, encouraging us to seek new experiences, to value diverse perspectives, and pursue personal growth that aligns within this spiritual transformation, where again, helps us to not be stagnant. It helps us to not just get trapped into one way of looking at things. Again, too often churches get involved in only one thing or one aspect, and that's all you hear. And you wonder why people complain that they hear the same thing every Sunday. Again, uh, these things can be seen anew and afresh and help us have new energy that we could go about, again, doing things that make sense. So a childlike trust causes us to have faith as a foundation for learning. So here, Jesus' call to become like little children also speaks to the role of trust in learning. Children approach the world as an inherent trust, a sense that they are safe to explore because they are supported by those who care for them. In the context of lifelong learning, this childlike trust translates into faith in God as a loving guide, and faith in the process of learning itself. So just as children trust their parents to guide and protect them, so too must we trust that God will provide the wisdom and strength that we need to grow. This trust is especially important in a spiritual context where answers may not always be clear and certainty can be elusive. This is a very important point. Too many people want certainty. Too many people want there to be the truth, when the truth is so large that nobody can contain all of it. And that's why we're constantly grasping for that, trying to understand. Uh, but the thing about being in a good group of people that are learning together is that we understand not everything is always so clear, and certainty oftentimes can definitely be elusive because we're always learning. It's again goes back to the humility of understanding that we don't know everything. The people we're around don't know everything. So this all works together. Faith enables us to accept the mysteries of life, knowing that while we may not fully understand everything, we can still walk forward and trust. By grounding our learning in faith, we remain resilient in the face of challenges and open to new truths that may transform our understanding. So, embracing the child within is what we want to look at in Matthew 18:3. Jesus' words in Matthew 18:3 reveal a beautiful paradox. To grow in wisdom, we must become as children. This call to embrace a childlike heart, humility, transformative openness, and trust is a roadmap for lifelong learning. In a world that often values certainty and mastery, Jesus invites us to the endless journey of discovery, marked by wonder, dependence, and a readiness to be shaped by our Creator. Through this verse, we understand that becoming a child is not a limitation, but a profound freedom, opening our hearts and minds to a life of continual growth, depth, and understanding. In striving to become like little children, we are led not only into the kingdom of heaven, but also into a richer, fuller experience of life, one that is marked by the humility and openness that defines a lifelong learner. So again, the kingdom of heaven is not just an idea about somewhere in the afterlife you go and you just play harps and you live in a mansion. But the kingdom of heaven is this broad, rich experience that is right here with us in the temporal world. It gives us a fuller experience of life. And that's what Jesus is teaching, not just about going out in the graveyard and popping out one day and going to an afterlife that's supposed to be far better, but it's how do we make this life broader, richer, and fuller? And we do that again by embracing the child within the context of what Jesus teaches. Now, I did develop this chart. This illustrates this. This sort of concludes the reflection I had on Matthew 18:3. But if you see this chart, tells you the difference between these two mindsets. One is the mindset of a childlike openness, which is the lifelong learner. This is what Jesus is teaching us here, against the fixed beliefs of the fundamentalist mindset. First, you've got openness to new ideas. This childlike openness welcomes new insights, is eager to explore and understand different perspectives, whereas the fixed or fundamentalist belief resists new ideas, often viewing them as threats to established beliefs. These are people that are very insecure. These are the same sorts of ministers and preachers that have told me in the past when I've had conversations with them, oh, we can't discuss that in our church. That'd cause too much confusion. And the confusion that they're talking about is the fact that that might threaten their authority that they feel like they have over people, which is nonsense because we want to teach people how to be adults. I don't want to teach people how to be dependent on me or somebody else. So teaching people how to be adults and to grow up means welcoming new insights and new perspectives. Of course, this comes along with humility as well. We've talked about this. The childlike openness causes humility because we embrace not knowing everything, recognizing the need for continued growth. Whereas the fixed beliefs of the fundamentalists would say that they assume possession of complete truth, often resistant to questioning or self-reflection. I've noticed this about way too many ministers in particular, where they have not the ability to self-reflect. They're not question them or dare not think that they could be wrong about anything or that they'd want to be open to listening to somebody else. That's why they're often isolated and refuse to be a part of a group. Childlike openness also leads to curiosity. You can see here in the chart that curiosity, that means it's driven by a desire to learn, open to question, exploring, and being able to adapt. This is what lifelong learning does for all of us. It helps us to be adaptable. Whereas the fixed beliefs of the fundamentalists prefer certainty and clarity over ambiguity, limiting exploration. You can't do that. That's why they scare the hell out of you and they want you to stay in their tight-knit church circles, but only their church circles. Even though there's 15 Southern Baptist churches within a mile of each other, they feel like, oh, we can't let them explore anything else because they might run off because of this sort of competition that they have for each other. But in fundamentalist circles, they prefer certainty and clarity, and they want to limit the fact that you explore anything. This is why oftentimes you have groups like Scientology who say, don't look at the internet. Don't look at anything negative. You know, this is what cults do. And you don't have to be Scientologist or you don't have to be anything else to be involved in this. You could go to a regular Baptist church or wherever. But if you've cut yourself off from everything else, you cut yourself off from history and from other people, and you're afraid to even entertain other ideas, you're in a cult because you're afraid. You'd rather have the certainty than you would to have the uncertainty. So you're scared, and that's what happens. They keep people scared. This is where they can't grow up. But again, this is what the paradox is, where Jesus teaches that in order for us to grow up, we have to learn how to be a child, and we have to embrace that so that we can be a lifelong learner. Next, we have flexibility. Flexibility allows us, it means we adapt to new evidence and we're willing to change views based on what we learn. That's what most of the ministers I know are scared to death of. They ever admit they've changed their mind about something because people will see them as weak. But you can see over here the fundamentalist fixed belief mindset holds rigid beliefs and they're reluctant to change even with new information. Because again, they're going to say, well, they're going to think I was wrong about something or I'm weak in some way. And there's nothing weak about changing your mind. The weak part is holding on to a rigid belief despite seeing clear evidence of the otherwise. Childlike openness should lead to empathy and understanding. That means that we seek to understand others' perspectives, fostering empathy and compassion, whereas the fundamentalist or fixed belief mindset dismisses or judges others' beliefs, sometimes seeing them as misguided. A lot could be said there. Next, we have the childlike openness that leads to spiritual growth, which means that we view faith as a journey, open to evolving understanding and deeper insight. Whereas the fixed beliefs of the fundamentalists emphasizes strict adherence to doctrine, potentially stifling personal spiritual development. Again, this is the difference between being open, understanding faith as a journey, being open to newer insights, being willing to change, being willing to admit mistakes and learn from them, whereas the fundamentalist mindset is never, ever admit there's been mistakes, cover it up. uh, so there, again, it becomes stagnant and stale, and therefore it's so one-dimensional, this doesn't have, it becomes mythology. When you become a mythology, this is why you've got so many people deconstructing from the faith now. And they should deconstruct from whatever faith that they have been raised with in order for them to maybe preserve what's good out of it and just tear down and burn what's horrible and what's bad. The next aspect of childlike openness leading us to emotional resilience. This means that you're able to cope with uncertainty, accepting that growth involves challenges. You're open to the uncertainty that's going to happen in life. This is what happens to kids when they grow up in youth groups and things in churches and they go off to college and life just slaps them right square in the face. They're not ready for that because you've taught them all these certainties. And so the fixed belief side of this struggles with doubt or ambiguity, relying on rigid beliefs to maintain stability. This is why so many just either completely throw away religion or they get deeper into the fundamentalist mindset when they're confronted with the reality of life because they can't cope with the uncertainty that they have been flung into. Of course, lastly, here we've got self-awareness. This is a big one. Lifelong learners who are called to a childlike openness have a healthy self-awareness because we can reflect on our own limitations, continuously growing in understanding and developing our character. Whereas the fundamentalist fixed belief mindset is resistant to introspection, feeling threatened by any suggestion of imperfection. Because often within the fundamentalist mindset is this idea of purity. You're always challenged with purity in these settings, in these church settings, because you have to be pure in every way. And I'm not just talking about sexually or, in your relationships or anything else, but pure in doctrine. That's why they often will break from one another. They'll split. You hear these churches split. They'll split so often uh, over the carpet or doctrinal issues, just doctrinal issues that nobody can prove one way or the other. But there's these purity tests that always reside in fundamentalist circles of whatever brand, whether they're conservative or liberal circles. There becomes this line in the sand, and you're either one side or the other. But thankfully, a childlike openness and having the development of a lifelong learner. It helps us to understand our limitations and the fact that we continuously grow and we need, of course, that growth. So let's just recap here before we come to a close. Becoming a lifelong learner involves what? Well, we looked at Matthew 18:3. Jesus tells his followers to be his children, not for the sake of being innocent, but that adults must become childlike again to go through the learning process, because we must tear down what we think we know in order that we may continue to grow. And then I'll end on this. We always need each other to move forward. That's what we need. And I really appreciate those who were able to join tonight. I see several that's been on and off as we've, of course, went through this little study. Uh, I hate that some were not able to join the live Zoom panel. I'll get that fixed by the next time when we have our meeting. And I see some that are already commenting and joining. So appreciate you doing that on Facebook. If you got any questions, comments, if you enjoyed this lesson and would like to see more like it, please let me know. Just give us a shout in the content section or the comment section of Facebook, and just keep in touch with us. Appreciate all those who have emailed and asked about upcoming events. We thank you for that. We'll let you know more as time approaches. I know I will be speaking at the Swedenborg Library in Chicago, doing a lecture about uh, different church traditions in the Appalachian region, and really look forward to that. I hope that many will maybe benefit from some of my research. This is some original research into the primitive Baptists and other faith traditions within Appalachia. So it's really good. Some of this has not been done yet, so still working through and looking forward to giving that lecture. If it's not available live or online, I'll make sure to ask and see if that'll be made available later by the library. So it may just be something where they have to charge a little fee. I'm not sure, but anything to help them, I think, will be good for all of us. But thank you so much. I appreciate each of you that's been so encouraging. Come back and listen in, and I hope that you have a great week. Anything we can do to encourage you, we want to do so. Share this video if you will. Let other people know that there are those of us out there that care and that want to work together, that we can encourage one another in this journey. And that's definitely what we need. So thank you so much. Everybody have a great night.